He was going to run this meeting today, right? Actually,
He said he was coming, yes.
there we go. Sort of my question. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do a roll call and we'll get started. I don't like to delay opening a meeting.
Sure. Chair Tom Farrell,
Here.
Brooke Brown,
Here.
Mo Goyle,
Present.
Ryan Clinton,
Here.
and Ronald Hasso.
Here.
That is all we have at this time.
All right, we've got, I think, 3 more coming. We'll be here, but we'll go ahead and get going. I see we've got some citizens that are on here that are not on our committee. Do we have anybody that would like to address it on to any citizens wishing to address the comprehensive plan strike force for items not on our agenda? And I don't see any hands going up on that. So we'll get started. I would like to, if y'all don't mind, I have not had a chance to read the minutes of our April 12th meeting. And so if y'all don't mind, I'd like to table that until next meeting. I always like to read them before I vote on them. Unless somebody wants to go ahead and take that on, I would prefer that we wait and just take it up next time. There's not any big rush on it. So I don't see any negative hands, so we'll go on. Item number 3 is our work session with the BK Road Subcommittee. And while we're waiting for David, I worked with Bowie to put out a little brief survey that would go to the commercial customers and the tenants on BK's Road. You probably just received this today. So unless somebody has if you want to make any comments or changes, feel free to do so. Although I would like to send this out this week to the commercial customers. And just everybody, I think I'm right by saying this, Amber, this is being paid for by RCDC.
That's correct. They were going to pay for 50% of the comprehensive plan. And so we've worked our way through the first 50%. The city paid for that. And now we're on RCDC's dime.
Okay. And this would be a tremendous asset to RCDC in my mind. Hello, Jeff. So anyway, I'm gonna leave this open. If there's any comments that anybody would like to add to it now, we can certainly do that. But other than that, I would prefer to give people a couple days to read it, but I do want to get this out this week so I can get it back next week, by Friday of next week, so that we can go ahead and finish up what we need to do with that. So if there's anybody that would like to make any comments or changes on this, feel free to do it. Wally, I see you on here, sort of. See the top of your head anyway. And Wally, this is just a draft that I've done, and I've had comments. I mean, I had Bowie help me draft this, but if y'all have some comments or changes that we'd like to make, please feel free to do so, and we'll do it. I don't think there's any problem about getting changes. Does anybody have any comments or questions on this little commercial survey? Just so everybody knows, the first thing I asked for was, I asked if the branding committee or the, if we had done a commercial survey before I got this done. And I think, Amber, the answer was that is no. We did check with everybody and everybody said no, they hadn't done a survey on that. Is that correct?
That's right. We did check with everybody and nobody had done a survey, at least aimed toward commercial development.
And this is
Right.
strictly for, now the one question I'll ask everybody, and I'd like to get y'all's opinion on it. My thought was, we asked both our commercial owners and our tenants to fill this survey out. So there was some question about whether it should be just the commercial property owners or should it be for tenants too? And I think it should be for both. And that's the way I've kind of set it up so far, but I'm willing to listen to anybody's comments that they'd like to make. What y'all's thoughts? Wally, what about you? You're ground center on this. As I send this survey out, is this going to cause our owners any problem about, and that was my real crux of my question was, if I send it to tenants, am I going to cause my property owners any heartburn from getting this? What's your thought? Wally, you're
on mute.
you're on mute, bud.
Chris, I got some now.
There we go.
The only question I had about it might be that somewhere might be people who are in the question of whether they're going to sign a longer term lease and might be hesitant because they think maybe their building might get torn down as part of a redevelopment. So I think
Yeah.
that's the only thing that I don't think it bothers me a whole bunch because I got a bunch of people with 10-year leases.
Okay.
So,
Well,
but I think that could be a case with the smaller property owners along the street that might be in the process of changing.
And I thought about that, but I've tried to word this. We've tried to word this so that we're not suggesting that anything like that's going to happen. It's just a planning process and what they would like to see on that. And I know y'all just got this, so I'm probably asking things in a little bit in advance. But and a lot of our tenants may not want to answer it anyway, and if they don't, they don't, and if they do, they do. So I appreciate your comment, but I think that
That's the only comment I had, and I wasn't sure it was going to be a major issue. It wouldn't be a major issue with me.
okay, great. Anybody else have any thoughts on that they'd like to share?
I'm a tenant and I'd be happy to fill it out. So
There you go, Jeff. And do you think this would impact you if you were getting ready to renew your lease or anything around that? Good.
I don't think there's an indication necessarily about anything changing, and that's really what's going to drive it, right? And I think, the notion of tenants being able to, I don't know, have a little bit of a say if there is an evolution of what's going on Bee Caves Road, I would think would be attractive. But for the most part, we live in like, what is the world today, right? And that's not changing today.
Yes, good. Thank you.
As a matter of interest, I'll be photostating this and handing it to each of my tenants. So it saves you hitting the tenants in my building. I'd like to see them all respond.
Excellent. Thank you, Wally. And if you would, just make sure they know they're going to be able to send this. This will be on the same way we did the residential one. It'll go to SurveyMonkey. It's not necessarily a hard copy. They can do it online and send it in. It makes it a little easier for us to handle it.
Very good. I'll put that as a note in my file and have the website address where they can go online.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other, I'm going to leave this open for the next couple of days. If anybody gets a chance to read this and wants to make a change on it, just please let me know. And we'll look at doing that. But I do want to get this out so it'll get that out of the way. The other part of this that I wanted to kind of go over before David gets here, and Ashley, would you text David and let him remind him
Yes.
for me, please? We've been working with Amber, and Ashley and I have been working with Dale Murphy, who is our engineer with Friesen Associates, about our capacity on our water and wastewater. And I'm going to go over the water first because that's the easiest. There are a couple of caveats I'm going to bring up on this. We have sufficient water. There's no question about that. We have about 40% of our allotment from the city of Austin that we have available for water. One thing that Dale didn't address on here is we also have a 12-inch water line that runs down BK's Road. There are two types of issues that we have when we do this. One is we have a flow restriction from the city of Austin, which we've never came close to. And then we have a daily model. And if you took the largest amount of water we've ever used in a month in Rollingwood, we still end up with almost 40%, 38% of our water capacity available for us. And for commercial properties, that's more than sufficient to what we have. Now, there's two caveats to that. There is some issues with our, we redid originally in 2001, we had a 30-year water contract and it had a 30-year extension. There was a amendment that was made in 2004, and I'm not sure of all the details on that, but the one thing that was put in that amendment that is negative to the city of Rollingwood was the city of Austin can come back with a certain months of notice and have us purchase our own raw water supply from, say, LCRA or somebody and run it through the city of Austin for processing. So it wouldn't affect our supply of water so much as it would, we would have an extra cost potentially of doing that. Amber, is that your understanding also of that provision?
Yeah, that's correct. And I've got Dale looking into that now and confirming that that's what would happen. And that's kind of what the plan is that we would have to go to the LCRA and purchase so many acre feet of water, make a payment on that. And then we would have to go back and treat or pay the city of Austin to treat our raw water.
And part of that is because of, it's my understanding that a significant emphasis for that provision that was put in 2004 was that the city of Austin was being contested at various times with the Railroad Commission and Brooke, it wasn't TCQ, it was the Public Utility Commission that establishes the rates on that. It was a PUC. That's what it was. And a number of their wholesale customers had sued the city of Austin because the PUC was determining whether or not they were adding additional cost in there that should not have been into their water rates. And actually the PUC did ultimately rule against the city of Austin. Rollingwood was not a participant in that particular case, hadn't been. I'm not sure if we now should be, but that's another matter. That's for city council to decide. But the litigants, and I think there were 4 or 5 different either small cities or MUDs, did win that case and got back some money from the city of Austin on that. So that is a provision that our cost of water could go up, and I'm guessing it will go up when the contract comes up for renewal, would be my guess, given everything that's happening in the city of Austin right now. So that's something that we have to kind of look at. It's not a real significant number per se, and there are some other alternatives other than LCRA that we can get raw water from. We actually can get raw water from wells that we have in Rollingwood. That makes the treatment a lot more difficult, but that's possible. And we could get it from some of the other districts further out west. But LCRA is the logical place to get it from. And they, as long as they have the capacity in the Highland Lakes, they will be willing to do that. Any questions on the water supply portion of this?
So just one, Tom, does the contract come due in 2031 or did that get extended in 2004?
Brooke, I'm going to have to pull that back up and read it.
I'm
I
curious.
don't know the answer to that. I do know that they have, it doesn't have to be at
2030.
Yeah.
2030?
30. And it doesn't have to
Yes.
be, there is a provision, I believe in there, and Amber, correct me, that says if they give us X amount of months notice, they can implement that. They don't have to wait to the end of the contract, I don't believe, to do that.
Right, it says
follow-up.
may require.
Yeah, and it doesn't, it's not a necessarily one, but I would, if I'm the city of Rollingwood, I'm operating under that will happen. And we ought to be prepared for it. So the other issue that I would like to include in this utility report is to recommend that once the new portion of BK's road is improved, that we make sure that we have both water and wastewater conduits under BK's road, so that we don't have to bore or cut up BK's road after they finish it to put a new water or wastewater line in. And the TxDOT, we did do that on the original section through Rollingwood that was done under BK's road. And all this is a oversized pipe that we can put our water pipe or our wastewater line in without tearing up the road. So that's a recommendation that I would like to include in our reports that we do on that I do. I'll write this report, but those are going to be in there, and I'd put any other comments on water that if anybody has. So if y'all, I know y'all just got this too, so as you read this, please do it. Now the wastewater, any questions on the water? Pardon me. And I'm not seeing any hands, so we'll go on. The wastewater is a little more difficult because we have two different ways to look at that. Our system was actually built to where we could handle around 1,100 LUEs of service. And we are currently having service of roughly, let me find it. Of about 600 LUEs of service right now, is what we have. So we have the physical ability to handle probably another 500 LUEs of service. Now we have a limitation because of our contractual agreement with the city of Austin to take that. And that we have two limitations. One is that the lift station, which they refer to as number 1, which is located on Delana Lane. All of our flow in Rollingwood generally goes to this lift station, and it goes over the hill and under Mopac and over into Zilka Park to a lift station in the parking lot of Barton Creek Pool. And that's how we tie in. And it's a 6-inch line there. We did have some units that had somehow commercial units and residential units that had already hooked up to the city of Boston, and that counted to. Let's see if I can find that. Yes, that counted to 64 LUEs of commercial, and then we have 20 residential houses that are located on the south side of BK's road, and they were already hooked up. And they were hooked up before we put in the sewer system. And almost all of these had a contractual agreement with the city of Austin to where they would, granted the city of Austin either easements or property rights for Old Barton Skyway, and they were able to get a sewer commitment from the city of Austin because of that. So they had rights that predated our getting sewer into the city of Rollingwood. Currently, out of lift station number 1, we have 118 LUEs of service on all of our commercial properties. This would be everything from Edge Grove east and from Montebello east on the south side, including our shopping center and Rollingwood Town Center. All of those are hooked up. We have about 6 properties that are located north of the Dry Creek area. Wally, starting at Wally's property, and on the north side of BK's Road that are not hooked up to sewer currently in any way. And that was left that way because TxDOT was wanted to redo their plans on BK's Road, and we had to know what their plans were before we could put in a sewer. So we still don't have the plans from TxDOT, I don't think. So if we ever get those, we'll be able to know how to hook those up. Bottom line, when you do with the contractual obligations we have with the city, we have somewhere between 100 and 200 LUEs right now that our engineer would certify that we have. He's doing a model, which I'm going to guess is going to add somewhere around another 50 to 100 units of LUEs that we would end up with on that. So he hadn't finished it yet, but he's working on it. And once we get that, we'll be able to do that. I would like to, and in my opinion, we owe it to those existing 6 commercial customers to get first dibs on the any excess capacity we have. Right now, they would probably take 15 to 20 of the LUEs that come out of there with their current usage. No more than that anyway. So, this is where we stand with that. We've got enough LUEs of sewer capacity to do certain things. We're not going to have a lot of excess capacity from a contractual obligation that we can use for residential, but we could use it for restaurants and retail on that. So remember, an LUE is a living unit equivalent, and it's the way that's calculated is that's basically what the city of Austin and is generally accepted as to how much each single family house produces per day. And that's how it's calculated, 245 gallons on that. There are some numbers in here that I do want to bring your attention to. And I think our engineer put this in here. I'm not sure why, but there are some calculations that the city of Austin and engineers like to do to where they go in and they will put, you have peak weather flow where you have I&I, which is infiltration, that water comes in somewhere to our wastewater system, and that counts as flow during a peak rain period. About the only units that we have that would cause any kind of problem like that is we do have 2 manholes in Dry Creek, but they're sealed. And we have 1 on a very low area in Rollingwood that we also had to seal. Other than that, we haven't had a problem with I&I. And I think the city has been very aggressive on making sure that we haven't had that problem. And we've never overloaded our system. So we do have that as a backup, that the city is paying attention to it. And that's great. Congratulations, Amber. Appreciate that. So if we used all the numbers that they have, I think that we would have sufficient to proceed with our with plans that we have. Just so everybody knows, if we looked at going originally to having rental units or a lot more residential units in Rollingwood, we could tap that out pretty quick if we weren't careful on that. So just a word of caution on that. We do have a big tank, an excess tank that we have that we can store in. And if we necessary, we could always come in and put another tank if we had to. So very expensive. That one, it's about $10 a gallon to put one of those in the ground. Any questions on that? And I know y'all have just gotten this, so you have to take it with a grain of salt until you get a chance to read it. But I will be available. I've looked through this and worked with the engineer, and I'll be glad to go over it with anybody individually if y'all want to, or I can try to answer any questions right now. So, any questions? That was easy. So, okay. All right. So, as our work session on BK's Road, and I'm still not seeing David, hadn't showed up yet, huh?
He said he was going to be late,
Okay.
but he did say he was planning on joining.
This long, huh? Okay. And I'm going to apologize, but I was not at the last meeting that BK's Road had. So if anybody was here, if y'all could kind of fill us in as to where we were, and we'll start from there. Ryan, were you at that last meeting?
Do you mean our joint meeting here?
Yes.
Yes. I don't know if anything was resolved. We kind of began going through the map. I thought you were here for most of it, Tom.
I had to leave.
Yeah, we
unfortunately.
began going through the map that David presented, and I think someone screen shared so we could all see it, which was nice. And but I don't think any major decisions were made. It was all just kind of a beginning effort to walk through it and to share ideas regarding potential properties. We kind of started on the east side and moved west in those larger properties, discussing those larger properties.
Did if you would let me just kind of go through, make sure that we know some of this. I missed one thing on the wastewater. I did want to put that out. We have our contract with Austin for these that are direct does limit what they can do without us going back to the city of Austin. Currently, we have these 64 LUEs that are directly connected to the city of Austin. Those would be all on the south side of BK's Road, and running from Montebello to Old Walls Charlton. And that would be centers 1, 2, 3, the hospital, office building, and the 20 units that we have on there. And then our little small buildings that we have off of Montebello. So did y'all go on the north or south side of BK's on y'all's last meeting, Ryan?
Well, somebody else may have a better memory of what exactly we discussed at which meeting, but we've talked about properties on both sides, and we had the two experts come in and talk about what they thought the market would support. And I think I'm not prepared to lead a discussion of the BK subcommittee. Didn't know that was a possibility today, but I can certainly open it up to the extent that anybody has ideas regarding any particular properties and ideas on what our next steps should be.
Yeah, let me kind of say that I was here for the meeting with Matt and Sean. I wasn't here for the meeting before that. And I think that's when they were going over properties on the map. So I'd like to take that up again and just kind of get a discussion going on some of the ones that I think are I think are going to be there. You know, the east side, the church, does anybody recall? I was not at that meeting, but can anybody give me any kind of briefing as to what y'all's discussion was on the church site? Does anybody remember? And I'm not seeing it. So, well, I
I
guess
can talk about it if no one else will, but I mean, I think right now we're very open-ended. I don't think any major decisions were made or any conclusions were drawn. I think everybody was just talking about wanting to be creative, find potential additional uses, but at the same time not impose negative consequences on adjacent landowners. Mo, it looks like you wanted to weigh in. I'm just trying to answer it. I'm certainly not trying to.
no, I appreciate it. This is
Go here.
it's just a work session, so we're not making.
Are we I'm apologies. Are we talking about the last BK subcommittee meeting?
The last subcommittee meeting? No, it's actually the one before that, Mo.
Okay, yeah, I also got kind of mixed up on which was which, but the one that I think was the last one is out. We were discussing. Anyway, I jogged my memory because it was similar to what Ryan was saying. We were kind of discussing the overall approach, and we discussed some specific properties, kind of that are hidden or tucked away. I remember pulling up my Google Maps and looking at a few that I've since driven by. But I mean, the purpose of that meeting was more informational and really just pointing out I think David was leading it, pointing out different properties, a couple of which I wasn't very familiar with. But that's it. Again, along Ryan's comments, it was more informational. And
okay.
I don't recall specific action items.
Well, I'd like to kind of, our next step is try to get some of these to where we're getting some thought process. And we don't want to finalize that, obviously, until we get the surveys back that we have. But I would like to look at that. There are some limitations on some of this. And just starting on the east side that I know of, the church site, I know that there's been several approaches on a hotel there or retail. And as far as I could tell, the problems that have come up on that is, number one, it's just from an operational standpoint, it's not an easy site to get into. Now they may make that easier when they do any improvements on MOPAC, or they may make it harder. I'm not sure what the plan is ultimately going to be on that. But to me, that's not a site that we can depend on easy access to get in and out of. And that's always seems like to me it's going to be a potential problem to do that. And we also had some neighbors that are really close to adjacent to that property that we've talked about before as we had to do that. So now they have tied that church site into Rollingwood Town Center so that they share parking, and you could access it, I guess, through the light there at Rollingwood Town Center, but to me, that's kind of an awkward way to get into it for anything other than what it's used for now. So that's just my thought. And I've gone through, I walked each of these properties, and I if you'd like, I can go over what my view is, and y'all can share them or go with it or not. That's my view of that property. Is I'm not seeing that's, if somebody can do an innovative approach that's a low impact use on that property for either retail or hotel, okay, but I just don't see how that's going to, without having a big impact on our neighbors behind there, to do that. And Wally, I know you don't like our 100-foot setback. I'll just say that up front. I know you don't, and then I understand what you're doing with that. So then I'm going to go to the next property, and I think we just go through each property and kind of I'm going to give you my opinion. Y'all share whatever you feel like sharing on each property that we can go through with this.
Hey, Tom, can I chime in on the church property?
Oh, yeah, anytime. It's
And
open.
I'm sure I'd invite anybody else to also. I'm sorry, my old dog is making some moaning dog sounds in the back. I apologize for that. She's 15 and barely hanging on.
I know the feeling.
You know, my feeling on the church property is obviously, of course, we defer to the church to be our neighbor as long as they ever want to be. We certainly don't want to put any pressure on them to be anything other than what they want to be as a church. I think that we should make clear maybe in a vision statement, less so than a zoning change, that should the church owners want to do something else with the property, that we would be open to it. I personally think a hotel is not a good use because we can't spend the money. Well, two reasons. One is we can't spend the money because it's restricted under state law. And two, I think that having a 24-hour operation would negatively impact the adjacent property owners. So I would say, in my opinion, the best use of that property is the dreaded mixed use of, you know, giving a developer the opportunity to put in condos if they wanted to, maybe some retail. We'd love retail. Obviously, that'd be the best use for the city. Office, if that's what they wanted, but that we restrict the height, any height to the front of the property and not the back where people would be looking at the back of it from their houses. And I think you could do that. I went to the backyards of some of our neighbors there that invited me to take a look. And what you see now is the back, very back of the kind of second, I don't know if it's the second or third story of the church.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it would be very negative for them to have lights or even windows on the back of that property looking back at them. But if that could be one story there, and then towards the front, we would allow more height. I think that could be a win-win for everybody, but that's my view, and I would invite others to chime in.
Do you think access is a problem, Ryan?
I certainly think that the back of that church property, which I think is literally only accessible from Delana Lane, which is the closed portion of Delana Lane. There's some fields and church property down the hill, and I don't think that's accessible at all under really any circumstance.
But that's in the floodplain.
Yeah, even if it weren't, I don't see how they could possibly do anything there.
Yeah.
Up on top, I mean, I think that a smart developer could figure it out. But again, those are my views. Someone else was trying to chime in. I certainly don't want to take over the meeting.
Okay,
Tom, hi, this is Amber. Hey, I just want to clarify something. I think, Ryan, what you're talking about is the hotel occupation tax, the hot taxes. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, I looked under state code. I'm not sure. Maybe there's a different code provision that I'm not aware of. I looked up the hotel tax under.
Okay, so just a point of clarification. If the city decided to, so you could have a hotel without collecting the hot taxes. I believe it goes to a vote of the citizens to determine whether they want to collect those taxes. And then those taxes can be put toward community events, anything that draws tourism to the city. And I know that there are a number of cities who could get creative. Maybe like it could fund the women's 5K, and there might be opportunities to invest in the park. But it would just be something we could look at, but we certainly would not have to collect that tax.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. And yes, the way I read it is that the taxes that we can get from a hotel must be spent on tourism, with the exception of arts. It was like 5 or 6 different ways you could spend it on tourism. I mean, you could also spend it on arts. So certainly if we decided that was the best, that what we wanted was targeted funds towards tourism and arts, I think that would be the way to go. But for me, I would rather have general retail that the city could use for any purpose. That's how I see it. But again, don't mean to take over.
Given the wastewater restrictions that we just talked about, is a hotel even feasible there? I mean, how many LUEs does a hotel take, and would that limit us with the retail and office development we're looking at?
It doesn't take, I think it's, there's a percentage. I'd have to look at, Ron, how that, I can give you the old numbers, but I hesitate to do that because they're not current. But it's usually, you know, if you had 100 units there, or you're probably talking about 20 LUEs would be my guess. Because remember, you're not doing this 24/7 like you do at home that you have. It's a little bit different that they have that they come in on. They do there's some set calculations that they can do that come up with that. And again, anytime if we have an issue that gets where we're concerned about that there's a use, there's no problem about requiring a particular use. Let's just say this is a hotel, to require a holding tank to minimize the flow, because our contractual deal is gallons per minute.
Mm-hmm.
And if you took and we pumped 24/7, we could handle 1,500 LUEs, and we're using 600. So I mean, but contractually, you don't want to pump 24/7. Believe me, because something will go bad. But that's we do it. Well, let me make a suggestion on this track, because I'd like to try to get some concrete deals started. It would seem to me, Ryan, I agree with you on that back portion, but and I have been on my list, and I haven't done it yet. I was going to go by and visit with the pastor and just tell him what we're doing, so they don't get the idea that we're trying to ask them to move. Because as far as I'm concerned, as long as I've been in Rollingwood, there's been a Park Hills Baptist Church there. So it's part of our community, and it should stay part of our community. But I would, unless they have some great objection to this, which I'm guessing they won't, but if they do, then that's a different story, and we'll come back on that. It would seem to me that we might want to look at this 2 ways. We may want to say, okay, on the front part of the property adjacent to MOPAC, you can go X height, and then on the rear of the property, going back about halfway across the track, you can only go to 1 story. And that's, you know, I'd like to get down to where we're looking at making some recommendations on each property, because that's one of the things the city has asked us to do. That's not normally what you do on a comprehensive plan, but that was specifically in our charge. And so I'd like to try to do that if we can. And we can be pretty general about it. We can say, look, depending on the plan, minimize the disruption to our neighbors to the north, and the light disruption, and then have a maximum of 2 stories up or on the front, because it's probably the highest point in Rollingwood, I would guess, right there. One of the highest, if not the highest. So anyway, that's, and I've kind of written up a little note, and I'm going to give them to David on each of the tracks that I walk to come up with. And I'm going to kind of just go through that, and we can kind of discuss it as we go through. Any other comments on this first, the church site that we?
One more comment. Does the parking agreement with the structure carry over to a future use, or is that just with the church only?
I'm betting that it carries over, and I don't know the answer to that, Ron, but I'll check that. But I can't imagine that they would limit it just to their current use. The guys that originally developed Rollingwood Town Center, which still own it, Endeavor, actually had proposed several times to purchase the wanting a use on the church site. So I'm sure they're tied in, but I will confirm that. And I'll send an email out confirming that or whatever. It's a good point. Rollingwood Town Center, they obviously just built this over the last, well, they just finished one building. It's going to be office for the most part, although we have a bank building that's in there. That is, I would think that the highest and best use of that property to me as a resident of Rollingwood would be a restaurant. So I could even tell them which restaurant I'd like to see there if they would ever ask me. So
Tom, Brooke, just
Yes,
one question. When you say Rollingwood Town Center, do you mean the lot that's 2,500 Bee Cave on the map?
it's actually Rollingwood Town Center is a PUD that includes 2,500 and 2608 Delano goes all the way back there. It's the Endeavor buildings, all of the Endeavor buildings, and I think there's 4 of them there.
Does it also include 2702 Bee Cave that's in purple?
I believe it does, yes. And that is where that bank building is. But it's all part of a PUD. Now the 20,
Hey, Tom,
yes, sir.
my question would be, and maybe Amber knows this better than any of us, but are there any, what restrictions, if any, are on their uses as part of the PUD? In other words, are there any uses that we have prohibited that we as a committee would like to revisit and potentially tell them that we'd be okay with opening back up?
Restaurant was prohibited.
Yeah, I think Tom, are they C1 or C2? I can confirm what designation they fell under, but basically,
It's-
once they had their PUD agreement, they applied that.
Yeah, the
zoning.
PUD agreement is separate from that. But Ryan, restaurants were prohibited.
What about, retail, condo? I mean, what, is it wide open other than that? Or is it only office that was allowed?
If I remember correctly, the PUD agreement specifically allowed office and a few ancillary deals. I think they could have a coffee shop in in the buildings, but it wasn't anything they could not do retail. It wasn't designed for that, and it wasn't. But I would bet that if we allowed them to do that, we would. Now, they have sold individual buildings to different people. It's all still under a PUD with us. Rollingwood Town Center is a PUD. But like the bank building is owned by an individual, and they lease it to the bank. It doesn't mean that we can ever change that, but I'm just saying it's, that's, to me, that's a use that I would like to see changed on there. But
And is the bank use a retail use or an office use?
it's actually listed as you mean under our zoning code?
Well, either under the PUD or the zoning code. I'm trying to figure out what we have.
Yeah, the PUD agreement specifically allowed them to put a bank building there.
Right. I guess I'm not asking what so much we allowed, because that's obvious what they're doing. But what I'm saying is, have we prohibited them from doing something else? In other words, did we say you can have a bank and only a bank? Or did we say you can have an office that includes a bank? Or did we say you can have a retail and that could be a bank?
Well, the PUD agreement was a actual plan that was approved, and it was a planned use that was approved. So they couldn't deviate from that. It did specifically give that building as a bank. on the PUD
Okay, so
agreement.
right now it can only be a bank? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. It could be, now could they use it for office? I'd have to look back at that, Ryan. That's a good question. But I know that they were allowed one bank on this property. And one bank only.
And just for everybody's purposes, I think this is correct, that we get no tax revenue, retail tax revenue from a bank, right? There's no sales tax.
Absolutely not. And they're very costly. I'll bust at banks forever on this, Ryan. They're costly to the city because we have to maintain policing of those. Now, we're not having a lot of, thank God our traffic is so bad, nobody can rob a bank and get away. There was a time when people were robbing banks and, driving away, and we had to maintain a police presence to make sure they didn't. Now, there's one thing I want to point out to everybody that I'm not sure that we are real strict on enforcement of this, but there is an ordinance that I think is still in effect in Rollingwood that prohibits businesses from staying open for business past 10 o'clock at night on that. Now
That's right, Tom.
That's going to affect restaurants. Now we gave, when banks came in, each bank got a special use permit, and they have a provision that basically says, okay, we're not going to count the ATM as you doing business after 10 o'clock.
That the restaurant Sways in Westlake, if I'm remembering correctly, they were the first Westlake business to get the exemption.
Yeah.
I think it's almost understood if you're going to approve a restaurant, you have to give them the exemption. I don't know if it was worked out beforehand. It was a fait accompli, but they did approve it, and I think it's the only one in Westlake that has it.
Yeah, and restaurants, Westlake's got quite a number of restaurants, but they and most of them don't stay open. Sway obviously has a large bar area, and that's a little different than most restaurants that they have on that. So, but Ryan, to get back to your thought process on that, I mean, what I'm thinking on this is, I don't think that this, the PUD agreement is not something that could not be changed. It could be changed. Now, could they put in a, they don't have any residential land to put down any kind of a residential PUD or residential development. We actually have looked at utilizing that little area. I think when they did this, they provided 3 acres, 2.5 acres to the city of Rollingwood that we have as a park that's off of Delana Lane back there that we own, the city of Rollingwood owns. It has restrictions based on our deed restrictions from Rollingwood Town Center, but we do have that. So I think that this property, getting down to this, is given the age of this property, given the access that they have, I'm not seeing that this is going to, I don't have a problem about allowing retail in this development if it comes in. And I don't have a problem about putting in, allowing, change some of this uses to restaurant. Now, the real problem we have anywhere we have restaurants, it's not as prevalent as it once was, but we've had a history of Rollingwood to where when we had a restaurant adjacent to our residential property, there were a lot of cooking smell issues and grease trap issues that we've had complaints about over the years. So that is something that I think I can't get out of my mind because I've had to battle it for so long.
Like the folks who live behind Terry Black's there in Zilker.
Yes, a good example.
That's just, it's like when if they built a runway near your house, except here you're not buying a house near an airport, you're just buying a house, and next thing you know, you got barbecue smoke for the rest of your life.
Well, the problem we had that I faced back in 2000 was the restaurant that was in where Chinatown is right now, different owners. They had a lot of cooking odors that drifted over to the houses on Timberline and in that area. When Mr. Lee took it over and built let's think, what's the name of that? Bistro 88. He put in some incredible scrubbers, and it still is a problem, but it's not as bad as it was. I mean, the city had complaints every day that operated back in 99, 2000, 2001. So, and some of y'all live right behind that shopping center where the restaurant is now. And I can't help but to believe you don't notice the smell that comes in. And it's probably not as bad as it was, but it's still, anytime you're around a restaurant, you're going to get some kind of smell that comes out of there cooking.
I do, I'm right behind Chinatown, and we do smell it. It doesn't particularly bother me, but certainly there's a difference that I moved in after it was there, not before it was there, and that does make a difference. I guess we could do some research on mitigation of smoke, because I do think it is horrible for neighbors to have a barbecue place come in and then have them smoked out of their house every day.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there are mitigation tools that actually work, but I certainly wouldn't do that to any of our neighbors.
Well, if you knew how bad that was before they put the scrubbers on that deal and how it is now, because I live on Park Hills, and there were times when back in 2000 that we could smell the area. It's the whole city. It's not so. Yes, there are some scrubbers that can be put on there, and I think that's an absolute requirement of any restaurant, regardless of whether it's barbecue or whatever it is. We have to do that to protect the integrity of our neighbors back there. But I'm not an expert on cooking. I don't cook in any way, shape, or form. So I couldn't tell you how to do that, but I do know that they are available, and we can require that. And I think that's a perfect example of what we should require. So kind of moving through these buildings, because I kind of like to go through as many of them as we have time to do today. We've got a new neighbor there at 2700, and they're just finishing that building. So, and I'm not sure, I guess if they sell a pair of glasses, we're not going to get sales tax off of surgery, but we do get it if it is glasses or contact lenses, I would imagine. Don't we, Amber? You know?
I don't know the answer to that, but I could find out.
But that's not going to change regardless, since they're just finishing the building. I can't imagine
Right.
that we can see much of a change on that.
I would think
I
so,
used to
but
be a customer of TSO right there where the Chinese restaurant is.
Yes.
And I bought my glasses from them because they did my eye exam. They did charge me sales tax. Whether you got any of it, I don't know, because I don't know how they rendered it.
Well, we hope we did. We're supposed to. If they charge sales tax, we're supposed to get our share.
I think the same would be true. The only thing you won't get a sales tax on, I believe they do surgery and such at this new facility. You're not going to get anything from that.
Okay. Okay. Well, moving on, the ones that I have the issues with. The next two we have, 2706 and 2708. They are vacant land. And part of the problem on that is the creek kind of flows right in the middle of those lots. And they're not really, the only way they could be developed is if you put the building on one side of the creek and the parking on the other side. With the exception is if we allowed, and it may encourage some development on that, if we allowed the development to be moved closer to BK's Road, they may have enough room then to put that on one side of the creek or the other. I don't think we have any permits pending on this property, do we, Amber?
No, we don't.
I will tell you the topography of that and the site of that. I think that is a strictly just an office site, as much as I hate to put that, but that's what I had on there. I couldn't see it being anything but an office site. So, and y'all will have to drive by it, and I think you can see where it is. It just kind of drops down off of BK's Road. It's a very narrow piece of land that's usable on that. Now we come to.
Tom,
Yes.
I would agree. I would agree. I think just as a general rule that I would support, and I would hope others would support, eliminating setbacks in the front,
Yes.
so that we can move businesses closer to the road. It will. I think it's a win-win for everybody, especially given Wally's position on the ones in the back, that we should at least be giving people that room on the front. It's all concrete anyway for the most part in most of these lots. I don't know if either of those two lots are buildable regardless. I would certainly not support anything of two-story there because again, they too, those houses are right up adjacent to those two lots. I doubt there's any way we could do it, but I would want any building to be on the roadside of the creek. I mean, it'd be terrible for people to have buildings on the opposite side of the creek, right up next to their houses. I bet the current setbacks probably eliminate that possibility anyway.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that if those two lots are buildable at all, and I'm not sure they are, that we would want it to be as close to the street as possible.
I think to be honest, so we don't spend, I mean, if I had to look at this, I would imagine that somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 feet is maybe 15 at the most is what you would have on these two tracks. It's not going to be a major building just because of the topography and the site that you have the creek running right through the middle. So, and this is where now David will probably have a little bit of different view on this because he deals a lot with water quality issues. And when you build across a creek, as far as I know, 2700 may be the only building in Austin that's built across that spans a creek. But you know, it's been there a long time and it didn't get washed away at our big floods. So I guess it's still there. So, but there's two things on that. I think moving these to BK's Road, and I'm hoping everybody's in agreement on that because I think we've talked about that before. Removing the setbacks on the front is to me paramount to anything we're doing on that. So I'd like to see us do that. The next track I have is we're coming up on is the service station that we have. And again, that counts as retail. So I would leave it at retail. They really don't have a terrible amount of room because of the creek that comes through there. So I think that we're going to be, you know, they're going to have a small deal, but on my map, I had put this as a retail zoning that we would have. Now, they do have that issue, and it's a local retail is what I put it as, which is a little bit different than some other things. It's a local use that I call local retail. We don't have a zoning code for that specifically, But I think that that would be beneficial for us to look at it that way as to the usage, how much of a impact a retail use might have on our city. And a local retail is a local use that's being, that basically the neighborhood uses for the most part. Now, the other one we have is 2712 BKs, and it obviously is a retail center. Again, I'm not proposing anything over 2 stories on any of these properties that we have on the north side of BK's Road. There are some places here that I would tell you that I think it probably should be a 1-story, but and if I'm going to do a 1-story, this local retail that I have, where the service station is, I was looking at that as a 1-story, just given its how close it is and the topography it is to those residents that are adjacent to it on that. So y'all have a thought about that, but local retail, I was assuming to be a 1-story type of a use. And then on the 2712, I had put general retail, which would allow it to go to 2-story. A 2-story retail, I haven't found anybody that has been able to tell me that that they have a successful 2-story retail deal, with the exception of Tom Turkel that built the Triangle development. And he had some 2nd-story retail that was useful on that. Any comments on that track? This is the track I'm talking about is the track with the Chinatown restaurant site in it and TSO.
This is Ryan on the one right behind me, and again, I don't think anybody's going to build on it. My understanding from all of our consultants is that no one's going to build a 2-story retail, but I agree with you that that's what's allowed now. I don't have any desire to make it harder for people to do what they already are allowed to do, but would want anything pushed towards the front of the lot and pushed away from the back.
Yes.
Tom,
Yes,
I
sir.
believe that property could not be redeveloped if it's the 100-foot setback as it stands without a variance. And I still think it's a green belt, which means it's just plain can't be built on, because they're right at the back of their lot.
Okay, and I think, Wally, you're right, and we need to. That's something we're going to have to address, because I think all of these, if they get reused and redeveloped, they're going to face that kind of thing. So we have to come back and figure out whether how we address that. And I think there's some mitigation. My thought on that, just so you know where I am, my thought on that is, okay, the intent that we had on that was to mitigate this big development on Delana Lane to our neighbors to the north. We've learned a lot from that on how we handle lights and parking, and that we can do that without so much of and still give our property owners some room to develop on that. So I think that we're going to have to look at that. And I think that's a separate discussion, if you don't mind, but let's just assume for right now.
That's fine.
But I think that's a major point that we're going to have to look at how we address that. And I think there's some ways that can be done on that by how it's being adversely affected. Ryan, just I know this is 2-story right now. This is another one that I had put on my notes that I did not believe that this was a developable as a 2-story development, and it probably should be left as a 1-story, but that's the way I had it. But they are allowed currently to go 2 stories. And I don't mind leaving it that way and see if somebody can come up with a really neat plan that can come back and bring that to fruition, that they do that.
Look, I'd much rather it be 1-story, but I believe in property rights too. And and didn't enter this process to make it any harder for anybody,
Yeah.
but only to protect what people had in their existing rights across the board. You know, both, but obviously, especially the residents right behind there. But I didn't enter this to try to make it harder on anybody, only to protect what people had.
I can tell you that if when the people I talked to on this, and they're not in this market, but I asked them, I said, well, how would you do that? They said, if you wanted to do 2 stories, you'd have to move everything to the front of the lot and put parking in the back, because they have part of this is in the 100-year floodplain. So you can't put a building in that 100-year floodplain. I'm not even sure you could rebuild where they are and it wouldn't be in the 100-year floodplain.
Yeah, they are right up on the creek. The back of those buildings are right up at the edge of the creek. Well, some of them are pretty close to the edge of the creek. Some of them maybe have 20 or 30 feet away from the edge of the creek.
I can tell you with my little eyes, I have seen that building have water flowing through it. So 1980, that building just was built, just opened. Jack Brown had a shop there, and the clothes were scattered all up and down Dry Creek.
I believe that. I've seen water coming in from the parking lot before. I don't think it was back up from the creek, but it was coming down from the parking lot. It's a tough location to have a building on, for sure. And I think my guess is that our parking requirements are the main reason that we see it the way it is. It's because they have all that parking in the front. I certainly wouldn't want parking in the back. I don't think most residents would want bright lights and cars adjacent to their properties. So it's a tough lot to build on, for sure. And my guess is that no one's going to do anything with it for a long time.
But I think that from our standpoint, I put general retail on that up to 2 stories. Although I was torn between making it 1 story or 2. Frankly, that's just me. And I was also looking at not pushing the building up to the front. Now, I will tell you the classic deal nowadays, Ryan, is that you push it up to the front and then you build a small parking garage behind it to take care of the parking. Parking garages are very difficult on adjacent properties. Because the lights shine through and the noise amplifies in those. And that's been a big problem. We've had to work with Rollingwood Town Center. You know, they built that first parking garage probably 20 some years ago. And I think they finally got a solution about 5 years ago. And it was basically screens that shut off one side. But you can't close off a parking garage because of the exhaust of the cars. I guess if we all go electric cars, we don't have to worry about that, but I don't think that's going to be, not right now anyway.
I for one really would not want a parking garage back there. The other thing that parking would do is put a lot of lights on. I mean, that's one of our best green belts in the city.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot of wildlife that goes through there. And I'd hate to shine lights on them 24 hours a day too.
And again, the 2 things I would say is on this particular lot, I was moving it to the front, but I also was not allowing a parking garage. I was allowing parking in the back to a certain degree with a setback. But the creek is the normal, is basically the setback on that. It wouldn't be any further back than it is right now. Yes, Brooke.
Is the green, what you're referring to is the green belt? Is that on the 2712 property, within the 2712 property, or is it between it and Timberline?
It extends from town center all the way west to where Rollingwood Drive turns into Bee Caves Road. It's a 100-foot deep green belt, and it was laid on in approximately 2002 in the council meeting that I attended. And it was started out to be a 100-foot green belt at the back of the town center Endeavor development. And I think the attorney at that time whispered in the ear of the mayor, maybe he better extend it because it was going to be possibly contested by Endeavor as a spot zoning. And therefore, the mayor at that meeting had a motion introduced to extend the 100-foot green belt all the way the north side of Bee Caves Road to where Rollingwood's periphery ends of its jurisdiction.
So what does that mean, that it's been designated a green belt?
It
Okay.
wasn't a green belt, it was a setback, a building setback. But it-
Tom, it is not a building setback, it is a use setback. And
Yeah,
the use is green belt, and you cannot use it for parking. You can't use it for a building. You can't use it for anything if it's still remaining in state law as a green belt. That's why I've been insistent, because I sat in that meeting and heard it called green belt.
and
It's why it's irritated me, because I've had people interested in the Palisades and redevelopment. They were going to come to the city, talk about what they could do. And they said, well, we went to the city and they said there's a 100-foot green belt. I said, yeah, there is. And I think it probably is wrong. And it was probably put in an improper manner, but I assumed that the city eventually would have to deal with it. The property you're talking about in this, right at this moment, not my property, the one you're talking about, if it's the 2-story office building next to the Chinese restaurant, that 100-foot green belt probably takes at least half of that building. It couldn't be rebuilt as long as it's a green belt. You can't variance it in because you'd have to change the definition of it.
Amber, can you do me a favor? We have, I know it, I always, I think it was delineated as a setback. The effect might be the same, Wally, but I think it was called a setback on the
If
100-foot.
it's a setback, it's different. A setback can be developed with a variance. That's my point. My very point is that if it's a green belt, you cannot vary it with a variance on this particular property.
Well, I had promised.
Anybody's particularly property.
I think, Wally, I told you I was going to check on that, and I haven't done it, but I will. And I'll make sure that I think I'm right, because I think it was used as a setback, but we'll find out. I'll find out and let you know. How about that?
Very good. Thank you.
And I think this, and you're correct, that most of this would have to have a variance, and to be able to do that anyway. And one of the ways that I had thought that we were going to be able to do that was to minimize the site plan requirement for a PUD. So a PUD could have an individual plan that would come in on some of the larger properties we have on there. I'll check on that.
Thank you, Tom.
Because I understand what you're exactly right, and that does have an impact on all of these properties on how we do that. And it was done on the whole properties. I can't remember. Your memory's better at it than mine, because but I know it. I know where it started, and I know where it ended up. So
I had a personal bull that was bigger than yours in the memory.
I would imagine.
Well, and my question really is, so what is being called a green belt is actually a limitation on the property itself, not public property that runs behind these.
That is correct.
Okay. And then the next question is, and I don't know this generally, but what are we talking about sidewalks along these properties? And does the sidewalk come off the private property, or is it within a setback, or what are we doing and thinking about sidewalks?
These properties have a sidewalk. All these have a sidewalk, and that is part of TxDOT's right of way.
Okay. All right.
They have that. Now,
So when you talk about moving it to Bee Caves Road, you're moving it to the back side of the sidewalk. or
It's
where,
actually-
where TxDOT right away would be.
Yeah, TxDOT's right of way extends past the sidewalk.
Okay,
I don't think it's far, but it does extend.
couple of feet, maybe.
Yeah, I can't remember. It varies on each individual property, Brooke, because they had their engineers determine how much they needed to make. So if you ran off the road, you would still be on TxDOT property. You could do this stuff. So, but I think I wanted to make sure David was on here to talk about the 100-foot setback, parking requirements, and then I had lighting and PUD sizes. Right now, we have a 5-acre PUD requirement, and PUDs have some advantages to our neighbors and to a city in that once it goes in there, we know what's going there. And I think that that's a good way for us to look at it. Just going through this, going through this, so we keep this moving. The other sites that I have, 2714, 2720, are office buildings now. And I just didn't see any way that I was going to be able to change that to, you could do, again, a very small retail there, but I just didn't see that would be, you had the access that you could possibly do too much of it on that, unless it was included in with 2712, which is the Chinatown restaurant. So,
And that goes to one of our previous discussions is potentially, encouraging property owners to work together, and to the extent that they could do so, that we would be open to eliminating side setbacks, so that they could get more use of a property. And I think we all agree that not every property needs its own driveway, and that it's actually not efficient at all to have every little lot have to have its own driveway. And I think part of that's not lot by lot, part of it's more of a vision statement, but I do think that we should be open to eliminating things that are just kind of an old school way of developing a plot of land, and that to the extent that property owners want to get creative and do something special on those lands, that we should encourage them to. Brooke's question reminded me of something that David had brought up, which is potentially encouraging sidewalks on the back of these properties and not just on the front, so that perhaps we could have a walkable loop around the greenbelt. And those are the kinds of things that I find really interesting about our comprehensive plan, is just to, at least in the vision statement, talk about the idea that we'd love people to come in and put something together creative, and that we're open to creative ideas to use properties in a way that benefit everybody, including them and us.
Just talking about that point a little bit, since this is a work session, the city of Port Aransas actually passed an ordinance called the Cottage Ordinance that allows a developer to bring a plan in to city staff and get approval. You could say I'm going to do a cottage development, which is generally smaller lots. De minimis PUDs is what I call them, but they don't use that term anymore. Where you may have 100 units, and it has a swimming pool itself. It's got a homeowner association, but they do smaller lots, smaller houses, with some restrictions on height and some restrictions on the size of the houses that can go in there on that. I have not been a fan of that type of, that's happened in a bunch of cities. I just know it happened in Port Aransas, because city staff, sometimes the citizens don't get the full amount of impact, their ability to give input before something gets approved on that. And I thought it needed to go to P&Z and city council before approval. But at that time, they generally let these things kind of float through when they come in. So I'm writing those down though, the rear side, the rear sidewalks. I think that would be something very useful, especially around this area. What are y'all's thoughts on 2714 and 2720? I was going to put the same general retail designation on those as I did on the Chinatown site. Any thought on that?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
In looking at the map, there were skinny, long, narrow lot behind each of the addresses you've given, starting at Edge Grove and going southeast. What's the
That's true.
story of those little narrow lots? I guess them to maybe be 100 or 200 foot wide and very long. Or at least they show on the map as that size.
They're unbuildable. You're talking about on the south side of Edge Grove.
South side of Edge Grove.
They are actually owned by the properties that are on the north side of Edge Grove. It's a little piece of land that each one of them owns on this. When it was platted, it was determined that these lots, this land on the south side of Edge Grove could not be used, and the city did not want it. So their suggestion was provide it to the property owner immediately adjacent across from it, and they can use it for a garden or a walkway, whatever they wanted to do.
The reason I brought it up is it seemed like a logical place, but everybody is talking about walking trails. That seemed to be a logical potential for a walking trail. It might give people somehow access over maybe as far as town center.
It could, but keep in mind, this is not owned by the city of Rollingwood. This is owned by individual property owners, and they would have to agree to that. And one of the reasons that the city did not want that property, it was a concern that as a city-owned property, it was open to anybody who wanted to walk across it. And some of the neighbors behind there, especially on Timberline, did not want any foot traffic right there.
I understand.
Now, this is a long time ago.
I just wondered, it was on the map, and I thought, gee, nobody's ever mentioned those, yet they're shown as individual lots. What's the story?
That is to the best of my memory, that's it. So, so I think that I had those two tracks, 2714, 2720, is the same as general retail that would fit in with. Now, I was using a pyramid approach on this. It says if it has general retail, you can still use it for office if you want to. And so, but that would encourage somebody to have a development there that would have a little bit bigger footprint for retail. Again, no more than 2 stories. And then we'll have to address how we do that rear setback to allow any development that would occur on that. Any thoughts?
That's fine by me.
Okay. And then the corner site I had was 2724. And again, I put local retail on that. The access of that actually comes off of Edge Grove. It could be a retail center, but it would be for local retail rather than for general retail that would come in.
Wouldn't that property also be affected by your 100-foot floodplain?
All these properties would, Wally. I think I'd rather have everybody on board, on our meeting when we talk about that, because we've got to figure out a way to handle that, or all of this becomes moot. And I agree with you 100% on that. So we'll get to that.
And Tom, this is another example of a property that really could be used much better if it were combined with others. I mean, in and of itself, it's really hard to do anything with.
I agree. Very small, and we could, I don't have a problem about putting that as the same zoning as the other 27, 12, 14, and 20. and going forward with that. Because and that would perhaps encourage one development that comes across there in time. Again, the problem is all of these properties have improvements on them, and the economics have to work where you tear those properties down. It'll be a tough road to hoe on that. That one probably not so much, but the other two, although our veterinarian has just spent quite a bit of money, I think, remodeling that.
Yes.
Tom, I'm going to have to drop off now.
Okay, Brooke, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now we'll get to the tough ones in my mind. These are the ones I had the hardest time with. My math's a little bit. 2800, 2802, 2808, 2814, 2824, 2826, and 2900. Wally, you thought you were the hardest, and they weren't the hardest for me.
Nope, they're the hardest. I've looked at them.
The one thing I'll bring up is right behind that property, you'll see in the orange, there is it shows and I'm not sure this map is absolutely correct, but it shows a piece of property that is listed as C1. The city of Rollingwood actually owns a piece of property that goes from Edge Grove to the west, basically to right behind the finish line. And it's mostly in the floodplain. But the city of Rollingwood actually owns that. I think it's 5 acres, isn't it, Amber, do you recall?
Yes, it is 5 acres.
So we own 5 acres there. We have done over the last several years a engineering study and actually have plans approved to channelize that creek. I think they got approved. I know we have the plans, and I think they got approved to channelize the creek that would take most of that out of the floodplain. So here's the issue with these properties. They're all individually owned. All of them are long-term owners, but there's 5 acres behind there that could be used as part of this development that the city of Rollingwood owns. And it would require them to make some floodplain adjustments on the creek, which they could do, and fix our bridge at Edge Grove, which I think would be required for drainage. And we would have to lease them that land. I don't think we can sell it because I think we took it as a park, but I can't really remember how we took it, to be honest. So if you want one of the bigger tracks that we have that is generally available for redo, this and our problem child, which is over here where Wally is, that is, if you added all that together, it's probably 12 or 15 acres.
Big piece of ground.
Now you have to span the creek with a driveway, but it could be one development. Now, if we have a retail potential in Rollingwood, I think these tracks from the Palisades to Edge Grove is probably the best retail bet that we have to get. Now, it'd be a heck of a job putting all these property owners together, but doesn't mean it couldn't be done.
The plus to this whole plan that you're talking about, commercial property is worth how many square feet I can build on it and lease it for a purpose. That determines the value of the land. Right now, those individual properties, as I see them, they have a limited economic value based just on the fact that they are what they are. And if you tear them down under the current circumstances, you can only probably build back at the most what you see. It'd be a pretty new building, but it would have no more square feet to lease than is currently there. So it's a very tough situation. It only has its really highest and best value by putting them together.
And including our 5 acres that we,
And including the Palisades.
yes, and including the Palisades, I agree. But if we did that, you have a heck of a project.
Oh, yes.
Now, our envisioned Rollingwood that we looked at earlier, all I could see was this property right here. Now, this is one that I think is, if I had to pick a potential retail use in Rollingwood, this would be where I would think it would be.
I think it could. I think it could encompass a walking trail, possibly all the way across the back of that area from Edge Grove, that would connect probably all the way up to the first office building past the Palisades, and could move up that hill.
Yeah, you get some topography issues there that make it a little difficult, but I think, to me, this, if I had to, I would like to include all of these properties from Edge Grove at least to the Palisades, and I'm not suggesting it wouldn't be further, Wally, too, into one, a proposed general retail use on that.
I would agree with it.
So, and it's, if I had to pick one that the city of Rollingwood should encourage to be developed, it'd be right here. That to me seems to be, everybody I've talked to on that, this seems to be a project. Now, again, you're also dealing with about 8 or 9 different property owners.
Yep.
So it's not easy to put together. But I'm assuming that it's a possibility that would work on that. And you'd have to get an agreement from the city of Rollingwood. Amber, I don't think anybody's ever talked about this. The city hadn't taken a position on that 5 acres being used for anything now. So.
No, this is the first time I've ever heard of this conversation.
Yeah. Well, I like to surprise you every once in a while, Amber. So,
Hey, we like to be a good partner.
yeah. So, what do you
Just
all
to clarify, you have brought up potentially opening up the orange lot that the city owns that is on the south side of Southcrest. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Well,
And
I would just say that as someone who's spoken to a lot of neighbors, I would want to heavily involve the residents of Southcrest with any potential opening of the lots that are essentially directly across the street from them. And I would not support even us putting into a draft without speaking to them first.
I totally agree with you. It's a longer term vision, and it would have to have, now those would have to have significant setbacks that goes on there. But again, we have a 5 acre tract there. And it would entail, the only way that could work, Ryan, would be if they reworked Dry Creek right there. Because otherwise it's going to be in the floodplain. And I'm not even sure you'd have to include that. That may be a good area to set back from, which is okay too, using it as a setback as opposed to developing it. But they may need some of it because these other lots are so narrow that come about on that. So.
Yeah, I definitely see the business case for what you're saying. All I'm saying is that when people buy properties, they do so with understanding of the uses surrounding them. And I would not want to change the uses of surrounding property without heavily involving the current owners of those properties.
I think that's absolutely, I agree with you. It should. And I'm looking at this from a property by property. We won't have to include the Rollingwood property, but we can include the rest of this and say, do you think that we could do that and say, okay, this is retail all the way over to Palisades. And of course, the Palisades is big enough to have a mixed use development. I'm not sure what mixed use means anymore, but it could have a mixed use designation on it. I don't think these tracks are big enough to be able to do that. What y'all's thoughts on that, gentlemen, ladies? Mo, what do you think?
I mean, I think so, but, well, I mean, in one sense, like, what do I know? Like, as a layman looking at it, it seems like it would work.
I think this is probably Rollingwood's best bet on having an additional larger retail, something that would fit on our Envision Rollingwood that we looked at, that's been presented to us before on that. This was the only place I saw it would do, and it wouldn't have to go back as far. And Ryan, it doesn't necessarily have to take that 5 acres. I looked at it from a standpoint of if they had to take part of it, they could do that. But most of it is covered by the creek anyway, so it wouldn't change much on that side of it. So
Yeah, I could see, well, first of all, does anybody know what the gray, I know there's not a road there. It almost looks like a road in the picture. What is that gray?
I think that's also owned by the city. Like I said, I don't think this map is exactly correct, because I think that our 5 acres go behind everything over to the car wash.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that, again, this is a place where we should, the vision should be one that encourages property owners to work together, suggest that we're willing to eliminate driveways on every property, suggest that we're willing to eliminate side setbacks for joint uses of property. And I certainly would be open to visiting with the South Crest people about whether they would be open to a more intense use of that orange. And I do like your idea of saying, okay, well, maybe we leave the orange the way it is, but maybe we eliminate the setbacks at the back of these tiny properties.
Yeah.
Because the setbacks probably make them entirely undevelopable.
Yes.
Whereas we already have a setback essentially in the orange property behind them.
Yeah, I think it works out either way, because the only thing that would be beneficial there is if we were ever going to tie all these tracks together, and they wanted to get to the Palisades, and they may not be able to do it, because I suspect that car wash is a use that's going to be there regardless. Some of the others you can, been pretty, although my cleaner's there and I'd hate to see them leave, personal standpoint. But some of these buildings have been there for 40 years, 40, 50 years. There used to be a 7-Eleven in one of those buildings. A little food store. Now that's dating me, but it was there. So, but all of these specifically retail use is the best use that I can think of. And if we're going to walk to any type of retail, we're obviously going to come down Edge Grove to do so. And this would be, to me, a way to do it, to get there, get that happening. So now there are sidewalks on this all the way to the car wash. Beyond that, there's not, because a Bee Caves Road has not been complete over that. So, well, that's what I had on here, and I'm going to skip on over to 3008 and 3010 and 3012 Bee Caves. We've got, I could not see these because of the topography there. I left these as just office, although current use on one of them, it does have a retail jeweler there. So I could see how that could do it, but until the roadway is done, I just cannot see that that these are going to be anything other than what they are right now.
At
Yes,
one time, there was a hair salon in the building next to the one that's the jeweler, and that has now become a what's the type of pharmacy that they own? A compounding pharmacy. I don't know if they charge retail or if they charge tax on their product or not. I just simply don't know.
No, they don't. These are, again, they're not under sewer, so it makes it a little tougher. I've never really found their septic system, but I suspect they have it there somewhere. They've got to have a drain field somewhere, and I think it's under BK's Road, but I don't know where it is. But eventually they'll be part of our system. The other property, 3012, has actually got a plan submitted to put in an office building. And that's been, I don't know where he is on that. But he's
he just had his plat approved.
Okay.
And so now that's happened. He's got building plans. They're going to start reviewing those. He's got building plans for an office building in.
Yeah, and it's a small office building. It's like 5,000 feet. If I remember.
Yeah, it's a small office building.
Okay. The next building, the next site over, which is South Peak number 10, is actually residential, and that's not commercial. And we have 4 more properties that are commercially zoned on the north side of BK's Road. 3102 is an office building that you have to get through off of Rollingwood Drive. And I don't see that being anything other than office. And then directly behind it at 5100 Rollingwood Drive, that site is actually zoned for office also, rather than residential, although it's being used as a residential use, but it is zoned for commercial. And then our corner, which we have Wally's old building, 3144 and 3160. That is another opportunity, I thought, to put a retail center in. Although right now, both of them are being used for, both sites are being used for office. We don't have any retail there at all. And that's my analysis on the north side of BK's Road. So, any comments?
What are the current height restrictions on those last several that we've talked about, from 3160 all the way back down to 3008?
I can tell you 3160 is got 3 stories. And it's got parking underneath and then 2 stories. 3144 is 1 story. Wally, that was your old building.
That's my old building.
But is it zoned to allow 2 stories or just 1?
You could build 2 stories on it. I'm not sure how 3160 got approved the way it is, but that was for my time. But it is approved. And it has 3 stories. And 3102 also has, and I'm gonna have to think about that, Ryan. That's a good question. It either has 2 or 3 stories. But it is located, you have to enter that off of BK's Road. Not off BK's, off of Rollingwood Drive. There's no entrance or for that building off of BK's, I don't believe. Wally, that's correct, isn't it?
Actually, there's a slightly side driveway off the entrance to my old building that carries you up to the top, and there's a way to go out then down onto Bee Caves. I don't know how it occurred because that predates my time of owning the building, but you also access it from Rollingwood Drive. There's a sign they've now put up there, I think giving their address and an arrow pointing down this driveway. You can't see anything down there, but you get down there and there's a little 2-story office building down there.
Yeah, I thought it was, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3, but I think it is 2.
I think it's 2 because a fellow that works for me periodically just got done working on it. He was talking about all the work they've done on it.
It's actually, you can't see that building from anywhere, really.
Yeah, now you can see it. They've cleaned out a lot of the foliage, and as you come down from Rollingwood Drive eastbound, if you look up as you approach it, you'll see part of the building. It's a real pretty nice white stucco building.
Yeah. You just couldn't see it when I was there, when I was driving down Bee Caves.
Just recently, they've cleaned out some of the underbrush, so I think they wanted some identity.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, I think that answers your question on that, didn't it?
Well, if that, yeah, I mean, I was more wondering what the restrictions are, rather than what the present use is, but if it's 2 stories there.
It's supposed to be 2-story.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to go higher, given that, again, that's adjacent to single family residences on 3102. Is there a house across the street? I know it's not technically Rollingwood. Is there a house across the street from 3144 across Rollingwood Drive? I think there is a house there.
There is. That's the entrance to Las Lomas.
Right.
And there's a house there that's right there at that goes into, right as you enter. It's a small house right on the corner of Las Lomas Drive and Rollingwood Drive. It's in Westlake Hills.
I do agree. I do agree with you that.
But it's an unsightly house.
Yeah, I'm not very good at picking those things out, as my wife will tell you.
I do agree that 3160 and 3144 seem to be prime opportunities for retail. Sorry, my dog's making a lot of noise again.
Not quite. Oh, okay. And there's no topography issue for us going there at all. These buildings are not on sewer. Now, I forgot to bring this up, and let me bring it up now. 5100 Rollingwood Drive is actually hooked to the Westlake Hills sewer system, not to the Rollingwood. Amber, I bet you didn't know that either, did you?
I think, are they on Westlake Hills? I know we just looked at them the other day, and I can't, sorry, my dog's barking too. I can't remember if they actually have service from Westlake Hills.
They do.
Okay, I was thinking that.
They do. I'm not sure how they're billed, but or how we're billed, but I won't argue about either way. It's just one house, so it's not a big deal. But our sewer system did not go down quite to that area, and Westlake was right there, so we got an agreement just to hook this one house up. So And the plan was to hook it up until we could gravity feed it down to BK's Road when we put the rest of it in. That's what we were planning. Okay. Wally, so I've got on 3102, I have office use. On 3144, 3160, I have retail, because that seems to me to be a great retail on corner that would come in.
I mean, my vote,
It's certainly a prime corner.
Yeah.
my vote would be to expand the uses rather than to change, simply change the uses. But if 3012 is designated office, I don't know why we wouldn't also allow them to have retail there. If 3144 is, designated one or the other, it seems to me that we should let the property owner pick out what the best use for the property is within the height limitations that we're comfortable with.
The only difference I had on 3102, Ryan, was if we made that retail and the main entrance is off of Rollingwood Drive, then you're encouraging more traffic onto Rollingwood Drive. It's probably not significant because they're only going so far. But that was the only reason I thought that might be an issue on that. And there's a fairly major topo change between 3102 and 3144. So, and I didn't know if that would work or not. Well, let me just kind of wrap this part of it up. This is what we agreed that the city asked us to do, whether in a comprehensive plan, this would probably not be something we do, but they asked us to look at a use on each one. And I wanted to get it started. And then the other thing I'll do, I think the next time this subcommittee meets, I think they've got to talk about the side setbacks and the rear setbacks, front setbacks, and parking requirements. So I think that's probably what we'll make as the next move on that. Because I think that's going to make all the difference as to what we can do with it and how we protect our neighbors and allow some development issues to come on this too. So if y'all would look at these survey questions and look at the wastewater reports. And if you have any questions, please let me know and I'll try to get that resolved, try to answer them or make a change. I do would like to send out this survey this week if we can. So if you get to do that in the next couple of days, do it. If I don't hear from anybody, I'm gonna send it out. So please just sing out and let me know. Other than that, do we have any other discussion or comments on what we went over? Any suggestions about how to make this better? I had not planned on doing this today. I'll just tell you that. So, but that's okay. We do the best we can.
Tom, it's hard work, but it seems like work that we have to do as a committee. So I appreciate you forcing us to push through it.
Any other comments from the public that we have? Not seeing any. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Wally. And a second. And we have a second, I hope. Mo, thank you. And without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Please let me
Thank
know
you,
if-
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.